Hi, this is Editor's Take. I'm Sakshi Batra, and with me is Gaurav Chaudhary. He's the Deputy Executive Editor of Money Control, and we are going to be discussing the high-level panel that has recommended to the government the changes or a relook or reviewing of the corporate social responsibility norms. Thanks a lot, Gaurav, for joining in. Now, what we have seen is barely a week after Finance Minister and Corporate Affairs Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has actually met India Inc. representatives and corporate entities and assured them that they are willing to relook at the jail term provision for violations of CSR norms. This has been also recommended in the high-level panel's reports that has been submitted to the government. So, do you see this as a big relief to India Inc.?
For India Inc., the recommendation should come in as a big relief if the government goes ahead and accepts it. First of all, the report is very clear. The panel is of the view that anything related to CSR activity or any violation related to mandatory spending of CSR funds should be treated as a civil offence, not as a criminal offence. The Companies Act, the amended Companies Act that was passed in the recently concluded budget session, made it actually a little bit more draconian. And the industrialists had pointed it out to the finance minister that facing imprisonment by corporate executives facing imprisonment for unspent money on corporate social set aside for corporate social responsibility, which is now a mandatory requirement, along with penalties, is in an extreme case is extremely draconian, and this is only going to vitiate the atmosphere. And given the fact that the economy is going through an extremely shaky phase,
yes,
anything that stokes an atmosphere of fear is something that is best avoidable by the government. The finance minister had actually discussed this in great detail in the meeting with industrialists in the CI, in the Confederation of Indian Industry meeting recently here in Delhi, and she also had said that this will be looked into with a great degree of sensitivity. Coming as it does, and the panel which has just submitted this report shortly after this meeting, although these are two independent, unrelated events. The panel was set up in October last year, and it has submitted its report now. Should come as a big relief if the government goes ahead and accepts this recommendation. Not a big recommendation of the panel is related to tax treatment of CSR funding and CSR funds. So the panel has said that CSR funds, money spent on CSR activities, should be tax deductible, and that should actually bring down the amount of money that companies end up spending on CSR if it is made tax deductible, which is again should come as a relief for corporates. Also, those corporates whose total CSR spending outgo is less than 50 lakh rupees, the panel has said that they should be exempted from setting up a specific CSR or a dedicated CSR committee. So that's again a procedural easing if the government accepts this. So all in all, net the panel's recommendations should be a big positive for corporates and India Inc. if the government actually goes ahead and accepts most of these.
Absolutely. So there is a recommendation to drop the prison clause that is actually, or provision that was made in the Companies Act. But even the high penalties that have been talked about, the 1 crore penalty for violating any of these CSR norms, do you think it will still encourage all the corporates to still invest the CSR fund in the right activities?
So the reasons that the amendments are brought about in the Companies Act is that over a period of Companies Act was amended, first legislated in 2013, and it has gone through several changes. CSR is one of the new provisions that were brought into the new Companies Act, under which companies with an profit of over 500 crore, at least 500 crore over the previous 3 years successively should spend 2% of it on CSR approved activities which are CSR related. The government had found out that most of these remained unspent and companies were rolling over those funds, and money was not going back. So the government actually proposed amendments in the Companies Act, which was passed in the budget session, where it was made the rules were made a little more stringent so that companies can actually spend the money on those approved activities, so that money goes into some kind of social activity and reform that should come in from the corporate kitties. On the rollover bit, corporates have been saying, and which the panel has also said, is that they should be allowed to roll over the funds, unspent funds, for 3 to 5 years. Unlike what the government had said in the Companies Act, that it cannot be allowed to be rolled over beyond 3 years and should be transferred to a dedicated fund.
Yeah.
That is something the government might have to relook into it again. And we need to see whether the changes, if the government accepts these recommendations, whether the changes are brought about through reframing of the rules or a fresh set of amendments in the Companies Act are brought in the winter session.
Absolutely, exactly, and that is what I was coming to as to what next do we see. How long will it take for the government to really look at these recommendations, and once they decide to accept it, will further need amendments to the existing Companies Act as well, and how long will it take for the entire process to take place?
So first of all, the government will have to say which are the recommendations it has accepted. We do not know yet. As of now, only the committee has submitted its report, and we know what the committee has recommended. It's up to the government on how they deal with this committee's recommendation. I would assume that the government will probably ask for comments from the public on the committee's recommendations, and based on that, government probably will call the industry for further consultations. And I would assume that the government will adopt a consultative approach to accept or reject some of the recommendations. And once they decide on the recommendations that they are going to accept, they might do it through changes in reframing the rules, which would not require amendments in the Act.
Okay.
But some of the recommendations might require an amendment in the Act. So depending on which of the recommendations that the government accept, some of these could be immediately notified by reframing of the rules, and those that require amendments in the Act will have to wait until the winter session.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot then, Gaurav, for sharing all that insight with us. Well, a whole host of suggestions have been made by the high-level panel on the reviewing of the CSR norms. But now we'll just have to wait and watch out to find out what are the suggestions that are accepted by the Corporate Affairs Ministry, and what is the final view that they take on these recommendations, and how soon will these suggestions actually come into action. With that, it's a wrap here. We also wish you a very happy Independence Day, and also a very happy Raksha Bandhan from both of us, Gaurav and me, as well as the entire team of Money Control. Thanks a lot for watching.